component. So we will see this point. So in regular interviews, this question comes, what is the difference between function component and class components, right? So what are the differences? Differences between function and class component actually. Difference between function and class component, one point I will tell you here. Actually, class components, technically basic, I will tell you, because already I told you that we don't prefer much of class components in latest. Right? So anyhow, first you need to know, because still several versions are using a class component is, it represents a JavaScript class. Technically, it represents a JavaScript class, and it is good for extensibility. Extensibility. That means it is easy to extend. You know that classes can be easily extended. They support inheritance, polymorphism. You can easily extend the classes. It is good for extensibility. Another important about class is actually component class comprises of state. It comprises of state. State. What is the concept of state? What is the point about state is actually, I hope everybody who learned about web applications, you know one concept very detailedly. When you learned about web applications, I hope you already know that HTTP is a stateless protocol. Heard about this? Huh? HTTP is a stateless protocol. I hope every web developer knows this point. Huh? You are using HTTP as a protocol, and HTTP is a stateless protocol. That is very common thing. That's very general about web. What is the meaning of this? Why it is called as a stateless protocol? It is very important and very general for web application. Stateless protocol means what happens actually is, suppose we have the server. So we have the web server. Now what happens? We have a page, and we want to load this page into server. That means we load the page onto server. When page is loaded onto server, some memory is allocated for this page. The memory is allocated for the page, so that whatever values that page have to use, those values will be stored in that memory. Now you finished using this page, and you are accessing some another page, page 2. Now when you are navigating from page 1 to page 2, you are going from page 1 to page 2. Now what happens? The server navigates from page 1 to page 2. It will clean up the memory for page 1, deletes everything, and it will load the memory for page 2 newly. So what happened for in page 1 is never known to page 2. Is never known to page 2. That means every page independent. So that means what happened in the previous page, the next page don't know. That means stateless nature is good. Stateless nature of HTTP is good. Why? Because after processing every page, it will clean up the memory. But it is not good if you are dealing with continuous operations. Continuous operations means, for example, suppose in page 1, user logged in, user ID, password. After login, then he finished login process. He got the inbox page. From that inbox, he wants to access some another page. When he moves from that page to another page, again it's asked login. Why? Because you may ask, like, I already provided previous page login, but that is only for that page. Every page you have to log in, because whatever you done for that previous page, it is gone. You have to log in again and again. To avoid this, to handle this problem, web developers, what they do, they use a lot of state management techniques. State management techniques are required. State management techniques are compulsory in every web application. By using the state management techniques, you can maintain data across requests, so that you can carry the data to other pages. You can carry the data to some days later also. That means not only today, tomorrow they come, data is available. That is possible with the help of state management techniques. So HTTP is a stateless protocol. It works with the mechanism go, get, forget. That means connects, loads the memory for page, process the page. Once the page is finished, it will clean up the memory. Stateless nature is good because it is safe, it is secured, memory is well managed. But it is bad if you want continuous operations. Then every web technology in the world have to use state management techniques. Java, .NET, PHP, Python, everything. Web application means they have to have state management techniques. So many state management techniques are there. Like we have, I hope you know, application state, session state, cookies, right? So we have query strings. We can transport using query string also. So we can have hidden. We also use hidden states. Input type hidden will be there. So various state management techniques are required to handle the interactions with the page. What is good about class is it have a state predefined. That's very good. That means if it have a state predefined, then it is easy to store the data and maintain the data across requests. So that is the reason. So it is known as stateful component. We call it as stateful component. Stateful components means they have state. State is configured by default for class so that we can easily use the state. You can easily configure the state. Not only that, another point here is the component class comprises of, means because it is a class. Because if it is a class, then what is the advantage about the class is, so class supports, easy extensibility, which already I told you, extensibility, polymorphism, all these are supported. In addition to that, class components actually have the ability of, you have constructor, right? That means actually we call a constructor is not a key feature. We should not call it as a key feature. Actual point is when you are using class components, when compared to the function components, these class components are already stateful and they have a life cycle. That means a life cycle is configured for component. A life cycle is configured for component. What is the advantage of having the life cycle for component is, component life cycle allows the component to handle different features in different phases. That means at every phase, component can have various behaviors. That means from component begin to component end, it can maintain various phases. The advantage of these phases is we can easily identify where the issue occurred. So where the process failed, where some output is not generated, where the problem occurred, we can easily track. The advantage of the lifecycle components is tracking issues will be easy. It is easy to track the issues. Not only tracking issues, we can maintain a component to work so with different behaviors. The component can handle different phases. So that means it handles phases, various phases from initialization. So to initialization to destroy. From initialization to destroy, it can handle various phases. For example, suppose I just give one example here. Suppose, so we are using some database. Suppose we have like some database. So we are using some database. We have some like database, and we are connecting with the database. So we have operations like some insert, like update, like delete, something like this we have. Now, generally what happens is we have to perform these methods, insert, update, delete. But before doing this, we want the connection to happen, connect with database. After these operations, we want disconnect to happen. That means these need to automatically initialize before the component starts, after the component ends. That means you designed a component to communicate with the database. Before it loads and starts in the memory, it should establish connection with database. That means before you do insert, update, delete, it should first connect with the database. After you perform these operations, it should disconnect from the database. Then tell me, so where you will give this connection work, where you will define this connection. If connection have to happen at the time of creating a component, and that connection should end after the component is finished, then where to give this connection? In a class. Component is a class, na? Then this is the work of constructor. This is the work of constructor. That means what constructor can do. Actually, when you ask anybody what is the purpose of constructor, then general OOP learners will tell you that constructor is for initializing values, which is not. If constructor is for initializing values, then it should be called as initializer. Why it is called constructor? Am I right? If anybody asks like what is constructor, immediate answer will come, it is initializing values. Then it should be called initializer. Why it is called as a constructor then? So constructor is not about initializing values. Constructor is about creating of object. I hope you people know that if we can restrict the constructor, then we can restrict creating of objects. We can restrict extensibility of class. We can restrict extensibility of the class. We can restrict creating of objects if you can restrict the constructor. So constructor is used for handling these kind of interactions. That means at the time of loading the constructor into memory, you want to connect. After that, when it is unloading, it should disconnect. These kind of tasks can be maintained in a life cycle. So for example, you know already jQuery, JavaScript, Ajax. I hope when you learned Ajax, you also learned Ajax lifecycle. Ajax lifecycle means you have Ajax start. I hope you know Ajax end, right? Ajax stop. We have like Ajax success. We have like Ajax complete, Ajax complete. These are various lifecycle phases of Ajax. Ajax error. These are all lifecycle phases. When you have worked with Ajax in JavaScript, jQuery, I hope you know this. What is the purpose of this? What is the purpose of this? To track the status of the task that is being performed. This is life cycle. Close complete. This is life cycle. What is the purpose of life cycle? Is to track every phase. That means when you are using any Ajax request, there may be problem at any place. Now, if there is a life cycle managed for that, then we can easily track where the problem is. For example, you placed an order in a food delivery app. In a food delivery app, you placed an order and order delivery is delayed. Now you want to know the reason where it is delayed. Then you have a life cycle for that. I hope you know that. Life cycle is you placed the order and second step, after you placed the order, restaurant have to confirm the order. It may take time in confirming the order. That means delay is in confirming the order. After confirming, the restaurant is preparing the order. The delay may be in preparing the order. After preparing, a delivery partner need to be assigned. The delay may be in assigning a delivery partner. After assigning, still the delivery partner have to receive, go to the location. That may be taking time. After that, returning may be taking time. Where the problem occurred, you cannot simply say that it is delayed. It is delayed. You have to say that our delivery partner is taking time at the restaurant. Our order confirmation happened, but it is preparing order taking time. That means you have to cleanly track every issue. That is possible if you have a life cycle phases. Component life cycle phases helps the component to track each and every issue from start to end. That is very important to manage different tasks from start to end. And by default, a component class comprises of some life cycle methods. By using those life cycle methods, you can easily track the issues. That is one important advantage about the class component. These are the various phases of component. These are all available with class. These are all available with class. But what happened is, so this is class component. So function component, it represents a JavaScript function. So it is not great in extensibility. Extending functions is always an issue. It is not great in extensibility, right? That means without disturbing the function, you cannot extend the function. Without disturbing the class, you can extend the class. You can implement the class, you can extend the class easily. Extensibility is easy. Another important point, but important here is here. So it uses less memory. It uses less memory. It is faster. It uses very less memory when compared to the class. Another very important is actually it is stateless. It is stateless. Up to React 17 only it is stateless. But very important is, so now that means you can say from React 17 and higher version, 17 and higher versions, you can use state. So you can use state. That means function component also have state. But we have to explicitly use state. We have to explicitly use state. Whereas the class component implicitly have state. Internally it have state. Here we have to use explicitly state. Explicitly means manually we have to import a class and you can use the state. So you cannot call function as stateless component anymore, because function can also have state, but it is not implicit state. It is an explicit state. So that is the reason. So previously, if you ask a React developer, so who is already aware of older version, he will say that classes have state, functions don't have state. Then I have to go with the class components state. No, function also have state now. And very important, function also have. So that means no life cycle methods implicitly. But from 17 version explicitly you can configure. You can configure explicitly. Earlier you don't have implicit. So even now we don't have implicit. Explicitly we can configure. That means now you cannot even say that functions don't have a life cycle. Function also have a life cycle, but internally not supported. We have to explicitly use them, explicitly configure them, right? These are the important changes, actually, differences. So that means when compared to class, function is always better. But why we were avoiding functions earlier? Much because of these all issues. No state, no life cycle. So now we have state, we have life cycle. So then why to use a class? Only in the concept where we badly need extensions. Extensibility is the major thing. Then we will go with class. And remember, React application can have a combination of both. That means few components you can design class, few components you can design function. Now tell me which component you will design as class. So which component you will design as a class component? What you understood by these points? For which component you will design a class component? You will decide that, okay, now this class is good for this. What do you say? For which component? I'm asking for what kind of components? What kind of components? I already told you here. The components that need regular extensions. Am I right? That means a component is not final. It changes regularly. That means a components keep changing. That means every time it is not same. Every time means every few days some new features will be coming. It will be changing. In that case, we will go with the class because we have to extend the component. That means we will not reconstruct the component. We will just extend. Some new features we will add. Every few days, some new features are coming. So in addition to existing, some new features are to be added. In that case, how you can extend? That you can do by using class components. Class components are good when you need a component that requires regular extensions. Suppose you need a component without any extensions. How it is we use in the same way for so much time. In that case, better we can go with function components. If you need regular extensions, then you can go with class, right? That is important. So technically, when to use a class component, when to use a function component, you decide according to the component's behavior and functionality, right? Only in the case of extensions, you better go with the class. Otherwise, nowhere we will use these class components in the modern generation, right? This is about how to define and work with the basic components. Remember, components, lot of things are there. One by one, we are learning. Components itself, we have to learn for so many days because components, one by one, we are exploring every feature about it, right? What you just learned up to now is how to create a component, whether to use a function or to use a class, how to render some markup using component. Only this you have learned. How to access a component in another component, how to make the component.